Hello there, my name is Sarah and I'm joined by my colleague Tim from Management Futures. We are putting two videos together on barriers, blocks, self-limiting beliefs. The first video, Tim will talk you through a few slides and him and I will have a short discussion about it. And in the second video, I will be coaching Tim around a block and a self-limiting belief. So over to you, Tim.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you very much. So now I'm going to seamlessly bring up the PowerPoint, which goes along with this section. How seamless so far, Sarah?
That's looking good, Tim.
Excellent. Okay. So as Sarah said, just going to talk to a few slides on how, as a coach, we can work with blocks and barriers. So first slide here talks to how they're referred to. So there's many different ways in which these blocks and barriers can be described, and here are 5 of them. So the first one is self-limiting beliefs, and that's the one that we'll focus on in the demonstration in the next video. And this primarily is influenced from NLP and also from cognitive behavioral therapy. So it's things that we as individuals or as the clients hold to be true, and we believe them and we hold on to those, but they may not be true. They may actually be outdated, or they may only be partially true at the moment. Second one is gremlins, which obviously takes me straight to the film, the Gremlins. It's not that. It comes from a book by Richard Carson, and it's the self-sabotaging voices that can pop up. Often they feel like they pop up on our shoulder or something that say, you know, you won't achieve this. You're going to muck this up, or it's not going to happen for you. Then there's limiting assumptions in the way that described by Nancy Klein, the author of Time to Think. She has her own views on this. Then fourthly, we have drivers, which stem from transactional analysis. So these are, I mean, it says here on the slide, the audio files. So things that run in our heads that tell us to be perfect. We've got to hurry up. We've got to please people. So these are the scripts that can run in all of our heads. And then finally, people reference to the chimp. So Professor Steve Peters, when he came out with his book, The Chimp Paradox, talks about the self-sabotaging or animal part of our brain that can jump out and stop us achieving what we need to. So those are some examples of how they're referred to. In terms of actually handling these when we work with clients, the first thing that we help them to do is notice that there is a block. Often people will have these blocks and they'll be saying these blocks, so I can't do this, it'll never work for me, and they don't notice them. So it's really important as a coach that we play them back, that often just as short summary, so we bring them into awareness. It's often useful for them to acknowledge where they came from. And sometimes these limiting assumptions that are getting in the way now, they may have had a benefit before. So it's worth acknowledging that. Then what we need to do is work with the client to help them to understand a belief or an assumption that would be more useful for them now. And often that's just a slight change. It doesn't need to be a full 180 reverse, but it might be, yes, I believe that, but only in these circumstances. And then what we need to do is we need to help them to identify a behavioral indicator of this new belief. So if this new belief is working, what will tell them that it's working? What can they practice to commit to? Okay. So that's the basics of what we would do. So how do they show up? So I've mentioned they show up in the language that people use and clients use. So people say it's impossible, or I could never do that, or people like me will never achieve that. new ideas are not appreciated around here. It's the script, it's the things that we automatically say, often without even noticing. And they may well have been true. So for instance, new ideas are not appreciated here. This may have been true in your last role, for instance. You may not have, new ideas may not have been fostered, but sometimes we can take those beliefs into a totally new role, and it's not as relevant. Okay. And here's just one example. So I referenced the belief busting from NLP and from CBT at the beginning. And here's a guideline script, really, that a coach can use with a client. So when they notice a block, they might say, so what is the belief that is getting in the way here? And where does this belief come from? What was its purpose then? So that question, what was its benefit? How does it affect you now? What happens if nothing changes? What would be a more useful belief? And it may take some exploration here to help someone to get to it. They may not get to it straight away. And then this acting piece. So if you were acting on this new belief, what would you be doing differently? And then the key really is for the client to commit to an action, commit to test it, even a small move, that they can test it between sessions and make progress on it. So I'm going to stop share at this point, Sarah. I hope you're still with me.
I am. I'm here, 100%. I've got a couple of questions.
Okay, fire away.
I was wondering, in your opinion, when is it appropriate to bring that to your coachee's awareness with regard to any barrier block that you notice? So
it's a good question. I think ideally we bring it to their attention when we notice it, when it's obvious. And it's one of the things that we have to listen out for. So as a coach, we should be tuned into the facts, we should be tuned into the feelings, the values, and these assumptions or beliefs that people have, we need to be tuned into too. So it might be that the first time you hear it, when someone says something like, I could never do that, you may even just summarize back, never, and just test that. If you've heard it a number of times, then there might be an opportunity to just stop. May I offer some feedback to you? On a number of occasions, I've heard you use the words, what do you think about that? So I think there's various ways of bringing it to their attention, and they will come up. They will come up in all coaching. I spot them in myself still now when I'm talking. So
me too. Yeah. Thank you so much for that. And also thinking back to the slide where you had all the different types of barriers and blocks, and I noticed the gremlins, which is mentioned less than the other ones. I think it's less familiar. Could you give an example of a gremlin that you might hear a coachee mention?
Yeah, it's interesting actually. So and to be honest, when I was first training and I heard about gremlins, I was a little reticent. You know, what is this? And then quite early on in my coaching, and I still remember this particular client. I thought I'd test this out. You know, it was a man who was a middle manager who his line managers, all his peers, thought that he was a super high flyer and he could go really go places, but he consistently refused to put in for promotions and to go for jobs. So in exploring this, you know, I asked him really, so what are the voices? What are your voices telling you, if you like? And he's latched onto it straight away, and he said, well, they're telling me that I won't amount to anything. And I said, okay, so they're telling you that won't amount to anything. So describe this gremlin for me. And he was able to point out a gremlin that was a family member from many years ago. He grew up in a small village, and this particular individual used to say, nobody from this village ever amounts to anything. and he was carrying that around with him as a none too useful gremlin. So there's one example.
And in your experience, if that's something that's from quite far back, how long does it take for the coachee to make some shift in their behaviour?
So, obviously we're all different. For this individual, it was probably about half an hour we explored this in the session, and this was a real eye opener for them, because they hadn't spotted it. They knew that they had limiting beliefs, if you like. They knew that they had doubts about their potential, but they didn't know where it came from. And this was something that had been told to them many times, or that they'd heard many times in their childhood, that nobody from that particular village would amount to anything. So it shifted them immediately, because they became aware of that, and they were able to start to test it.
Okay, that's really powerful, just to point it out and get that shift. Thank you so much, Tim. Is there anything that you want to add on blocks and barriers?
I don't think so. I think we'll come back in the next video, and I'll receive some great coaching. Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you, Tim. It was a pleasure.